The year is 1991, and SEGA needed a mascot that could outrun a specific plumber in a high-stake console war. But reality? Oh, reality is a lot more mechanical, messy, and unpredictable. I'm taking the logic, the physics, and the failures of the 60-bit era and rebuilding them on a workbench, one gear at a time. Welcome to GreenHillZone. For real this time. Let's get to work. The build started with a loop, or more specifically, with a giant cube of heavy-duty foam and a dream. The hole needs to be big, so I can add static grass later, so I marked it out and started carving. But why a loop though? In the early 90s, games were flat. You walked on blocks. But Yuji Naka, the lead programmer, wanted something that felt like a roller coaster or something. According to the history of Sonic, he spent months writing a special dot collision code. It was a mathematical miracle and allowed a character to walk on curves. Back then, if your math was wrong just slightly, the game crashed. If you ever played with styrofoam, you know it can be quite static. Okay, enough playing. I sawed off the sides to get that iconic launch pad for Sonic to stand on. A bit of filing and some modifications to get these blocky textures. To turn this forbidden marshmallow into something solid I can paint, I coated the whole thing in model plaster. It's messy, it's heavy, and it's the moment of no return. Did you know that the iconic SEGA vocal chime at the start of the original 1991 game was a technical marvel? Because of the limited storage on a 4 megabit cartridge, that single sound file took up roughly 12% of the entire game's capacity. Can my modern chip handle that? We will see. But here's the problem with building a world out of air and plaster. It's fragile. I tried to build a small, reinforced platform right before the loop. I used extra glue and even pushed metal rods into the foam like they use in skyscrapers. I thought it was a bulletproof plan. It wasn't. The foam was too weak to hold anything underneath. I realized I couldn't build a high-speed machine on a foundation of air. I had to perform a desperate transplant. I took a saw to my own creation, cut the loop off the foam base, and moved it to a solid box made of MDF wood. But building a world out of squares like this actually has a direct link to how GreenHillZone was created in 1991. The Mega Drive didn't have enough memory to draw an entire landscape as one giant picture. Instead, the developers used what's called a tile engine. They took tiny square images, 8x8 pixels each, and arranged them like a huge digital puzzle to create the world. Every single grass blade, rock and palm tree you see in Green Hill is just a collection of these tiny square tiles. While I'm cutting these wooden squares, I'm basically doing the analog version of what Sega's artists did on their 16-bit computers. With all the sides glued and dried, I could start gluing them to the top piece. I only used one layer for the top, as I thought that probably would be enough. Just use more glue, right? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I just need to glue the loop to the Oh, hi kitty! Focus. I need to glue the loop to the base, then I can secure everything with plaster and air clay. Did you know that if you entered a specific code in the sound test of Sonic CD 1993, a screen would appear with unsettling music and a message in Japanese that translated to "Infinite Fun Sega Enterprises"? Weird. With the MDF box finished, I finally had a foundation that I could actually fasten a gearbox and electronics to. It's a heavy-duty chassis, but it looks exactly like something Dr. Robotnik would build. Square, brown and industrial. To turn this back into GreenHillZone, I had to cover the industry in nature. I started slapping on air-dry clay, making it intentionally lumpy and uneven. The clay gives it that dirt under the fingernails feel that you just can't get from a 3D printer. With the clay smoothed out, I finally had a landscape that felt organic, but it was still a silent, empty world. To bring it to life, I needed a resident. I needed the one character that defined an entire decade of gaming. I'm starting with a solid, vibrant blue for the body. I'm not trying to lab match a corporate hex code here. I just want a blue that feels right for the memory. While I'm layering this on and getting the flesh tones on his arms and face, I started thinking about the weird logic behind his design. The real color story isn't actually the blue, it's the shoes. Sega's designers wanted Sonic to be the most recognized character on Earth, and in 1991 there was only one person more famous than a video game mascot: Santa Claus. They took the red and white directly from Santa's suit, added a metal buckle inspired by Michael Jackson's Bad video, and gave him the "get it done" attitude of a 19th politician. He was a bizarre mix of Christmas, pop music and 16-bit speed, but back then these colors were carrying the weight of an entire company. While I'm getting the eyes done, I have to capture that classic expression on his face. Believe it or not, this attitude was actually modeled after a US president. Sega was obsessed with winning the American market. During development in 1990, the designers looked at the rising political star of the time, Bill Clinton. They loved his new generation energy and his get it done confidence. They used that vibe as the blueprint for Sonic's personality, that impatient, cool attitude that told the world Sega was the future. That's why Sonic taps his foot if you stand still too long. He's literally saying, "I've got things to do, let's move." The same vibe Clinton used to win over younger voters. The model actually came with Sonic holding a ring, but to get everything to match, I cut it off and glued on the same kind that I'll use for the spinning rings later. This model was the winner of a vote from Discord. If you want to decide what I build in the future, you can also join. And if you like these kinds of builds, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's your favorite Sonic memories? I'm also close to 1000 subscribers, so I would love if you tagged along and subscribed. The world's foundation was built and the hero was painted, but it was still just a silent, static sculpture. To bring the 16-bit dream to life, I needed a heart. And that heart was a mathematical nightmare hidden right under GreenHill's skin. I spent days trying to come up with a solution for how the motor, the gears and the sound would fit the best. What I came up with is an intricate M formation of 6 custom-designed gears and 6 steel ball bearings to fit each hole, all working together to make the rings spin in the same direction. I originally tried a 100 RPM motor and tried to choke the voltage to slow it down, but DC motors have a breaking point. When you starve them of power, they lose their torque. My 100 RPM experiment just stalled under the pressure of the gears. Why do I want 60 revolutions per minute? In the world of 1991, 60 wasn't just a good number. It was more like the heartbeat of the industry. The original Sega Genesis ran at 60 Hz in the US, meaning the screen refreshed 60 times every second. By choosing a 60 RPM motor, I'm creating a physical link to that original hardware, one full rotation every second, just as in the game. I used acrylic rods to bridge the gap between the gearbox and the rings. Why acrylics, you may ask? Because it's rigid enough to not twist under the motor's torque and invisible enough to blend in with the scene. If my 3D printed teeth were off by even half a millimeter, the whole thing would chunk and ruin the illusion. It's a delicate dance between plastic and physics. But glue wouldn't hold a motor under this much torque. So I designed a custom PLA U-bracket to clamp the motor directly to the MDF base. It was all trial and error, balancing the gears so they were tight enough to grip but loose enough to spin. Seeing those gears floating on their ball bearings for the first time felt like an engineering victory. Now, I had to give this world a voice. I decided to take my custom Alchemist board and transform it. Originally designed for logic and LED, I wanted to see if I could turn it into a dedicated sound card to capture the essence of Sonic's world. To handle this kind of experimental electronics, I need hardware that is reliable, even when my code isn't. That's where PCBWay comes to rescue. They always comes to rescue. Just look what they can manufacture for you. It's crazy! Everything from PCB, CNC, 3D printing, you name it. All you have to do is upload your files and choose among all the fun options. Let's say you want to make a PCB. Here you have layers, materials, thickness, holes, soldering mask. Obviously blue is the right answer here. Everything you need. Then you upload a Gerber file and they do the rest. If you want to check them out and see what they can offer, link is in the description. With the gearbox spinning, it was time to move to the brain of the sound. I call this board the Alchemist. I designed it to be my personal workhorse, a versatile PCB that I can use in future dioramas and eventually give away to you guys in future milestones. Seeing that gold logo come back from PCBWay was a high point, but the assembly was a reality check. I was using a brand new soldering iron and struggled to get the heat exactly where I needed it. It's not my cleanest work, but in engineering, functional beats pretty every single time. I'm using an AT Tiny 85 here. To program it, I turned an Arduino into an ISP, essentially using one brain to teach another. But as I tried the SEGA intro, I hit the memory wall very fast. This won't do it. New plan! I settled on a simplified 5-second 8-bit melody that triggers right before those iconic ring collect pings. It's a lo-fi tribute to the original, and honestly, it fits the hand-built aesthetic of the diorama perfectly. Electronics are picky. When I first fired up the motor and the speaker together, all I got was a wall of static. The motor was polluting the power line with electrical noise. I had to perform some emergency surgery. I added a diode and a capacitor to clean up the signal. A classic hack to keep the speaker from screaming. If you look under the base, it looks like a copper rat's nest. It's a mess of wires and last-minute fixes, but it worked. I finally had a voice. The machine was finally alive. Now, I just had to make it look like a video game. But as I picked up my brush for the famous checkered pattern, I realized I was about to walk straight into a nightmare. I started with a base coat, painting the entire base in a deep dark brown, and the soon-to-be grass in a dark green color. While Sonic's blue was the branding choice, the world he runs in was a tactical strike. In the 90s, this Super Nintendo could display 4 times as many colors as the Sega Genesis, making Mario's world look soft and painted. Sega fought back with complementary contrast. By placing their blue mascot against a high saturation burnt orange dirt, they triggered a visual phenomenon where the 2 colors vibrate against each other on a CTR screen. It was a 16-bit psychological hack. Side by side in the toy store, the high-contrast Sonic looked sharper and more extreme, effectively tricking our brains into thinking Nintendo's palette was washed out and slow. My original plan was to use a 3D printed stencil and sponge on the light brown squares over the dark base. I made the squares big enough to spare me the needings of painting hundreds of checkers, but small enough to make them kind of true to the game. Early in the painting, I noticed that the squares don't quite line up with the corners due to the stencil, but I figured I could fix that later manually. It was a total mess. The light paint bled everywhere, leaving blurry, uneven edges. And the manual painting to make the edges crisp? Who am I kidding here? No, that's not gonna do it. Onward to plan... Is it like F at this point? I tried to pivot one more time before the final solution. I masked off a side with tape, thinking I could cut out the squares and spray the whole thing. But then came the betrayal. When I pulled the tape back, it didn't just take the mask, it took the layer of paint under it. I'm not gonna lie, at this point I was just tired. I'd put weeks into this project and it felt like the materials were fighting back at full force. I was honestly ready to pack up the whole thing in the box and forget I ever started. But then I remember the words of a great genius.
Make it simple, unless you're a YouTuber. Then make it complicated and cry about it.
You're right. I can make this a little bit more complicated. My next solution required a completely philosophical swap. How about water decals? But for that to work, I needed a light background so the transparent brown squares would actually show up. I had just spent hours painting everything dark and now I had to cover it all in a layer of new light brown. It was a tedious reset I didn't see coming. I assumed the decals worked as regular stickers. Drop them in water, slide them on, and they stayed forever. I took a blade and cut out the grass part. How can I be this naive? As they dried, they start to bubble and curl like dead leaves. Every time I touched one, it just fell off. I sat there in silence on my workshop, realizing I'd hit a dead end. Then I had a thought. How can I glue them to the base? I mixed some standard wood glue with water, a glue soup, and brushed it under the film. And it worked! The bubbles vanished and I saw light at the end of the tunnel, finally. It took me somewhere between 10 and 15 hours of repeatedly soul-crushing work. You know what that means? It's time-lapse time! But after 3 days of staring at brown pixels, the grid was finally complete. After the marathon of glue soup and decal madness, it was finally time for the grass. I'm using a green mossy color. It's quite expensive stuff, but the effect is honestly ridiculously good. It's like watching a construction site turn into a living world in like 5 seconds. And honestly, this is where my Patreons comes in. It's their support that allows me to buy these specialized materials and sink hundreds of hours into making a loop-de-loop. Without them, this project would probably just be a pile of MDF and frustration. So thank you for the continuous support. I'm really grateful. There's actually a weird logic to the flora in Greenhill. Have you ever noticed that despite the loop-de-loop being a 3D concept, the world itself is built on a grid? Every flower and every blade of grass in the original game is perfectly aligned in an 8x8 pixel square. By using organic materials like static grass and paper sunflower from Amomig, I'm actually breaking the grid that defined Sonic's world in 1991. It's a delicate balance. If I make it too realistic, it stops looking like a video game. If I keep it too flat, it loses the magic of the diorama. And these paper sunflowers are the total test of patience to glue together. But they provide that sharp handcrafted edge that bridges the gap between a digital sprite and a physical object. I've never used these kind of things, but I guess it's just gluing it together. Don't be shy to try new crafting materials and things. It's quite funny. I'll show you just like 2 leaves and a sunflower. No need to get more technical than that. You get the point. Let's just jump to the finishing part. We're in the home stretch, but the final boss of this build is just some physics. I had to mount the golden rings to these thin acrylic rods to give them that floating, suspended in air look. So I started with transparent resin because I was terrified of using superglue. If the glue reacts with the acrylic and turns white and cloudy, that would ruin the whole thing. But the resin just wouldn't bite. It had no grip. It's quite old by now, so that might be why. So with a shaking hand and a lot of prayer, I went back to basics. Super glue. I applied the tiniest dots possible and held my breath. Luckily, the hobby gods were on my side. No fogging. Just 3 golden rings, suspended exactly where they're supposed to be. With the ring secure, it was time for the final population. I glued Sonic into his starting blocks and scattered the last few tufts and flowers across the base to give it that extra layer of depth. Then I planted the sunflowers, and just like that, after the glue soup, the checkerboard nightmares, and the electrical rat's nest, I was done. The 16-bit world was finally a 3-dimensional reality. Now, there's only one thing left to do. Let's see if the alchemist can actually make this dream spin. On to the glamour shots.